As Donna Adelson prepares to face murder charges in court, the other 4 people have already been convicted of murder and sentenced to prison. That includes Donna's son, Charlie, who is serving a life sentence. His ex-girlfriend is also serving a life sentence for her role as the go-between with the 2 hitmen, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Riviera. It's worth noting that the victim's wife, Wendy Adelson, has so far not been charged in this case. For more now, we're joined by former homicide prosecutor Matt Murphy. This story is absolutely bonkers. She's 75 years old, the matriarch of this family, and it was all over her daughter moving a couple hours closer.
One of the interesting things about working homicide units is you would be amazed how many, or maybe you wouldn't be amazed, how many murders begin the morning in family court. And essentially what happened was they lost a big family court ruling. He sued essentially to keep the kids in Tallahassee.
Where he was teaching, it's where his job was.
Right, and like a million other divorces. She wanted to move, she wanted to take the kids, he didn't want that. They actually, after the murder, they changed the children's names, they did relocate them, and they actually passed a law in the state of Florida to prevent things like this from happening in the future. They essentially erased the father from the children's lives completely. So there's a lot here. The evidence against her is really interesting because her son, Charlie, has already been convicted of this, but there's a pattern of phone calls before the killing that are I think, very compelling.
Well, how do they know what's on those phone calls?
Well, they don't. They don't. So this is what would be called circumstantial evidence, but circumstantial evidence can be very, very powerful in a common sense sort of way, which is the way the jury is going to be instructed by this very no-nonsense trial judge to consider it. And essentially, it would go from Donna Adelson calling her son Charlie, who then would immediately call one of the different co-conspirators in the case that have already been convicted, and it would they could follow the phone calls down the line, down to the hitmen. And they did it over and over, both before the murder and after the murder.
So are any of the people who've already been convicted going to testify against Donna?
Well, yes, they're going to testify regarding the conspiracy itself. Now, they can't testify directly against her, except for one of them. There's a woman who was Charlie's girlfriend who's already been convicted.
She was the go-between between the hitmen and Charlie.
Yeah, and what Donna Adelson was doing is she was actually paying her money on the family dental business, like business checks, and she was signing those personally. So what the defense is going to argue here is they're going to argue, yes, she was an accessory after the fact is what it's called. But in the state of Florida, number one, she has not been charged with that, which I think is a very interesting move by the prosecution here, which has done a fantastic job so far. But they could charge that as what's known as a lesser related offense or a lesser offense. They didn't do that. So the prosecution's made the decision to go all in.
All for broke.
Going for broke, right.
You know, listen, the characters in this story are pretty remarkable. Dan Markel, the victim who was murdered, was a stellar, outstanding law professor at Florida State University in Tallahassee. He was an Orthodox Jew, and one of these staggering things this 75-year-old grandma is accused of trying to do was she tried to bribe him with $1 million to give up his 2 sons and let his sons move back to Miami. That didn't work. Then she told her daughter in an email, which prosecutors do have, that dress the kids up as Hitler or baptize them as Catholics. All as a way to drive a wedge between father and sons.
Right, and she hated him. And there's a very, very clear documentation of that in emails and in the lead up. She had all the motive in the world. Now, motive is not an element to murder, but it certainly is something that can play very heavily in the minds of jurors when they're considering a conspiracy like this.
What about the fact that she is caught, she calls her son Charlie on the jailhouse phone.
Right, after the
bump. Like my mom often does when she calls me, thinks she hangs up and she doesn't.
Right.
And Donna, the grandma, thinks she hangs up with the jailhouse phone, doesn't, and is recorded, because all jail calls are recorded, saying, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to go to a non-extradition country.
Right.
Like maybe China, or wait, I don't want to go to China. Vietnam, I'll go to Vietnam.
Right. And the court has already ruled that that is going to be admissible, and it's going to be introduced under what is called consciousness of guilt. So the prosecution's going to be able to argue, essentially, she's so innocent, Why is she talking about killing herself? And why is she about to run to a country specifically because they have no extradition treaty with the United States? And the jury's going to be able to consider that.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.